Okay, today we start with the warm-up. I'm going to go ahead and try to include warm-ups on the presentations for those people that are absent. Was the warm-up assigned on Tuesday the 16th and Wednesday the 17th in class and should be going on page 67. And the question was, what is the probability of two heterozygous tall pea plants producing a homozygous dominant offspring? So you have to figure out the parents' offspring. The parents are both the same. They're heterozygous tall, so it would be a big T, little t for both of them. And then you'd have to do the Punnett squares and then calculate the percentage of each. Of the Try to figure out like if they had offspring, what percentage of them would be homozygous dominant. So after you've completed the Punnett square, you should be able to figure out whether it's 25, 50, 100, or 0%. So it's up to you to do the Punnett square and figure it out correctly. Okay, so this presentation is about Mendel's conclusions and dihybrid crosses. Basically, it's a section of 7.2 where actually he goes over another finding that he had after he figured out the monohybrid pattern of inheritance. He then thought, okay, well, now we're going to do two genes at a time. So a plant that is both tall and has round peas or green peas is if I cross it with a short one that is wrinkled with yellow peas, am I going to have the same dominance? Am I going to have the same thing turn out that I did with the that I did with the other plants? In other words, where the genes actually combined? Like in other words, if you go with humans, would a blonde, blue-eyed human that mated with someone or had babies with someone that had brown eyes, brown hair, would their babies all have brown eyes and dark hair, or does something else happen? And based on what he had seen in humans as well as in other animals, he kind of suspected that didn't happen, that things didn't stay together, but he had to prove it. So that he also went off and made other experiments. So today's EQ is how do alleles segregate when more than one gene is involved. He went ahead and did the experiment so he can actually figure out mathematically what was going on, and he actually succeeded. So make sure you put this type. Actually, no, these are fill-in notes. It's actually on the back side of page 68. The one that homework worksheet where you had to figure out your traits and your family's traits that I left for homework over the long President's Weekend. But if you didn't complete that, you can complete it later. You need family members, but these are these notes are on the back side and they're fill-in notes. Okay, so good luck. Okay, bye. So to continue, okay, at the top of the page it says to write down Mendel's conclusions. You could either get this from your packet that you had to annotate on applying Mendel's principles that I gave you guys, 11.2, or and it's on page 318. You could copy them directly from there, or you could direct copy them from this PowerPoint. So the first conclusion is that genes control traits, so individual factors that are passed from one generation to the next, now called genes, control each trait. So that's pretty straightforward. So make sure you write that down in the appropriate area. The second conclusion is a principle of dominance. In other words, that some of these genes are dominant and some of them are recessive. He established that because he blended two of them together and he found that the next generation only had one of the parents' traits. So that's how he figured out that some of them were dominant and other ones were recessive. The law of segregation assortment, that is Mendel's principle number 3 that we're going to talk more about today. But basically, that two alleles are segregated during meiosis. The process of meiosis is the process of making gametes or sperm, egg, or pollen. And basically, when you make those, you only get one allele from each parent. So you only get like half of your DNA from each parent, basically. And here you see in the picture that when you get the chromosomes, which are pieces of DNA right there, they're in different colors. There's red, a yellow, a green, a blue. When they come together during the process of meiosis, pieces of some get stuck to pieces of the other. So the DNA gets kind of resorted or reshuffled, basically. And what happens now, we know that he didn't know that, but we know now that what happens during this process is that the DNA gets shuffled around. And that's why you wind up with kids that may or may not look like their parents. Sometimes you get children that look like not, they look like part of the family, but they don't look like the parents, because they've got like too many like characteristics that are shuffled and they don't look like one parent or the other. They look kind of like a weird, like just a combination, but not, you can't say, oh, that they have their eyes or their nose. They just kind of, you can see their parents in them, but they don't look like their parents. Or sometimes there's very little reshuffling, and you get parents that are kids that look like identical twins of their one of their parents. Then you have a lot of not reshuffling. Maybe that parent, that egg that got fertilized had or the sperm had very dominant genes in it, all of them, and the kid looks just winds up phenotypically looking just like one of the parents, and nothing from the other one because everything from the other one was recessive maybe. And sometimes you get sperm and eggs that are like that. Some of them are really shuffled, some of them are not shuffled at all, and it's just the luck of the draw. And the fourth conclusion, and its final conclusion, is the law of independent assortment, or that genes for different traits may assort or shuffle independently of one another. So, like for example, eye color is not dependent on height. So he figured out that through his experiments that we're going to talk more about today, he figured out that genes were not passed on together; they were shuffled around, and he called this independent assortment. Okay, so because of the law of independent assortment, you can have combination of traits that are different from your parents. For example, your father could have dominant traits for both hair color, black hair, and eye color, brown, but doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have the same traits. So sometimes we get this really weird shuffling that provides different traits to the offspring that were not present in the parent generation. Okay, so uh, basically, he was looking at different traits. Here we go with the traits that he was looking at. We have seed shape, seed color, pod shape, pod color, flower position, stem height. So these are the seven traits he was looking at, and he thought, well, if it is tall with uh, green or yellow peas. Um, are they going to be passed on together, or are these traits going to passed on differently or separately? So is a tall plant with purple flowers blended with a top crossed with a short plant with white flowers? Are all their kids going to be tall and purple? And are there are they going to be is that going to be passed on together? And is the next generation also going to be passing it on together? So he kind of wondered what happened when the traits were mixed. Were those going to be passed on together? So that is the subject of today's Punnett Squares. Okay, so we're back to your worksheet, and basically Mendel's a hybrid cross. Parent one is homozygous round and yellow, and parent two was homozygous wrinkled green. And so this was what he figured out about the results. So the round he is, let's say round big R because it's dominant. Wrinkled peas are little r because they're recessive. Yellow peas are dominant. Green peas are recessive. So those are the letters associated with each one to stand in for the alleles. So write the genotype of the parents. So basically, you get homozygous round in yellow would be big R, and big Y. Homozygous for round and homozygous for yellow. That's how you write it. Then we got homozygous wrinkled, little r, and a homozygous green. That would be little y. And you write them down right there. And the possible gametes to find out, the gametes once again are special cells used for reproduction, such as the sperm and egg, or the pollen in the egg in the case of the pea plant. Okay, so basically there's this rule, basically 13, 23, 24, 13, 14, 23, and 24. And this is AKA known as the distributive property or otherwise known as the FOIL method, if anyone's ever heard of that. And basically what you do to each of the alleles, you basically assign them numbers. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And 1, 2, 3, and 4. And basically what you need to do is combine 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 2 and 3, and 2 and 4 in the Punnett square. And the same thing for the other parent. You combine 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 2 and 3, and 2 and 4. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a moment.